Convergence. The first time I met Koda Whitethorn, the Rocky Mountains were literally collapsing, and he was racing up a slope to rescue stranded hikers, while I was staring at seismic data that was screaming that another earthquake was coming in, approximately 4 minutes. And I had to decide whether to warn him about something that might not happen, or let him continue his rescue mission without knowing that the ground beneath his feet might stop being solid very soon. My name is Oren Levy. I'm 26 years old, Israeli-American, and I work as a seismic data scientist for the U.S. Geological Survey's Denver office, specializing in earthquake prediction and risk assessment for the Rocky Mountain region. I was born in Tel Aviv, moved to Colorado when I was 12, and spent my entire career learning to read earthquake data the way other people read books, understanding fault systems, recognizing stress patterns, predicting where and when the earth might fail. But on May 17th, earthquake prediction stopped being an academic exercise and became a real-time survival equation. The initial earthquake hit at 2:34 p.m., magnitude 6.5, centered in the Front Range approximately 30 kilometers northwest of Denver. It wasn't the biggest earthquake Colorado had ever experienced. That distinction belonged to a 6.7 in 1882, but it was big enough and in the right location to trigger what I was watching unfold across my seismic monitoring network, a chain reaction of aftershocks and secondary failures that suggested the mountain range itself was reorganizing its stress distribution. Within minutes, the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Emergency Line was reporting avalanche conditions in the high country. The initial earthquake had dislodged snow and ice from slopes above 10,000 feet. 3 separate avalanche paths had been triggered in the Indian Peaks wilderness, and there were hikers on those trails, a group of 8 people who'd been attempting a high-altitude traverse and were now trapped in an area where every subsequent earthquake could trigger more avalanches. I was at my desk monitoring the seismic data when the call came through. Seismic monitoring. We have a mountain rescue operation in progress. 8 hikers stranded above Lost Lake. We're coordinating helicopter extraction, but winds are too strong for immediate deployment. Ground-based rescue is being initiated. ETA for ground rescue team arrival at the stranded group, 45 minutes. What's your assessment of aftershock probability? I looked at the data. The stress redistribution was still ongoing. Small aftershocks were occurring approximately every 60 to 90 seconds, but underneath the pattern I was seeing something else, something that made my throat constrict. The major aftershocks should be diminishing, I said carefully, but I'm seeing evidence of secondary fault activation. The primary earthquake created stress along dormant fault lines. There's a probability of a significant aftershock, magnitude 5.5 to 6.0 within the next. I pulled up my real-time calculations, 15 to 20 minutes. Location would be approximately at the epicenter. It would create additional avalanche danger in the high country. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then so we have a 45-minute rescue window but potential for major aftershock activity within 20 minutes. Yes, I said. It was the worst possible scenario. The rescue team needs to be aware of seismic activity. If they're above 10,000 feet when the secondary earthquake hits, they're in significant avalanche danger. Copy that, the operator said. Rescue team is being notified now. That was when I heard the voice that changed everything. Young, calm, and completely certain. This is Koda Whitethorn, Mountain Rescue. I'm moving to intercept the stranded hikers. I understand the seismic situation. I'm proceeding with ground-based extraction. I should have just given him the data and trusted the rescue operation. But something made me ask, what's your route? West-face approach, Koda replied, avoiding the avalanche-prone zones. I'll traverse the ridgeline and approach from the north. That keeps me on stable terrain and gives me time to coordinate with the stranded hikers. I pulled up the topographical map and overlaid it with my seismic stress distribution model. The ridgeline approach was actually smart. The north approach would keep him out of the highest-risk avalanche zones, and the ridgeline would make him less susceptible to secondary avalanche triggering. Your route is sound, I said, but you need to understand, if the secondary earthquake hits while you're above 11,000 feet, slope stability will be compromised. You'll have approximately 90 seconds from earthquake initiation to reach stable terrain. Understood, Koda said. I'm familiar with the terrain. I can move fast. And then he was gone, already moving toward the mountains. The next 30 minutes were the most intense real-time coordination of my life. Koda moved up the west face with remarkable speed. I could track his position through the rescue team's GPS coordinates as he moved from the base camp toward the ridgeline approach. I was monitoring the seismic data second by second, watching for any sign of the secondary earthquake I was predicting. Secondary tremors are increasing in frequency, I reported to the Rescue Coordination Center. The larger aftershock should be imminent. Pattern suggests within 5 minutes. Rescue team is aware, the coordinator responded. Koda is at 10,800 feet, moving toward the ridge. ETA for stranded hikers, 8 minutes. 5 minutes stretched to 10. The tremors continued. My seismic models were pointing toward a specific time frame, but earthquakes don't follow schedules. They follow physics, and physics can be unpredictable in its timing. Secondary earthquake initiating. I called out at 3:18 p.m. The ground motion data was unmistakable.
a magnitude 5.8 earthquake, centered nearly on top of the original epicenter. It lasted only 17 seconds, but in those 17 seconds I could see the stress waves propagating through the Rocky Mountain fault system, creating conditions that would trigger additional avalanches across multiple slopes. Avalanche warning, the rescue coordinator shouted. Multiple slides reported across the north face. Koda, are you clear? There was a moment of silence. Then, I'm on the ridge line. The ridge is holding, but I can see avalanches starting on multiple slopes around me. The stranded hikers are at approximately 11,200 feet in a basin that's showing avalanche activity on 3 sides. You need to extract immediately, I said without thinking. I shouldn't have been directing rescue operations. That wasn't my role, but the data was clear. The secondary earthquake has destabilized the slopes. The basin you're describing is going to be in the path of multiple avalanche flows within the next. I checked my stress redistribution models. 3 to 4 minutes, maximum. I understand, Koda's voice came back, but I'm not leaving these hikers. I'm moving to the basin. I'm going to get them out. He was going to run directly toward the danger, toward the exact location where I was predicting avalanche activity, toward a scenario where my calculations could be completely wrong and he would die because he trusted the data of someone he'd never met. What's your evacuation route? I asked. I couldn't stop him, but I could optimize his survival. Northeast ridge out of the basin, Koda replied. That keeps us away from the main avalanche paths. I pulled up the stress distribution model again, overlaying it against the terrain. The northeast ridge would be, yes, that was actually the optimal route. It would keep them away from the worst avalanche danger while providing the fastest descent. The northeast ridge is good, I confirmed, but you need to move fast. The seismic stress is still redistributing. If the slopes destabilize further while you're in the basin, that route will be compromised. I'm moving fast, Koda said. And then I was watching GPS coordinates move across my map as Koda raced up the slope toward the stranded hikers. 3 minutes later, Koda reached the basin. 2 minutes after that, the avalanches started. I could see them on the real-time monitoring system, not the seismic data, but the data feeds from the avalanche monitoring network showing slope movement, snow displacement, the physical evidence of multiple slopes simultaneously failing. 3 separate avalanche paths converged on the basin where Koda had just reached the stranded hikers. Avalanche imminent, I shouted into the radio. Initiate extraction immediately. Moving. Koda's voice came back. I've got the hikers. We're moving to the northeast ridge. All 8 are with me. Moving now. 17 seconds. That's how long it took the first major avalanche to reach the basin. 17 seconds from when I screamed the warning to when the slope behind where Koda had been standing seconds before collapsed into an enormous rush of snow, ice and debris that would have killed anyone in its path. But Koda had already moved. He'd somehow managed to gather 8 separated, frightened, altitude-compromised hikers and start them moving toward the ridge, all while a mountain was collapsing behind them. We're on the ridge, Koda reported, still moving down. Hikers are responding. Visibility is compromised by avalanche dust, but we're moving away from the debris flow. Keep moving, I said. You're clear of the immediate danger, but seismic stress is still. I checked my data again. My heart sank. The secondary earthquake destabilized slopes across a wider area than I calculated. There are additional avalanche risks on the southern and western slopes. The northeast ridge is still clear, but only if you move continuously. We're moving, Koda replied. His voice was steady, but I could hear the strain. 8 exhausted hikers at high altitude, moving through avalanche dust, trying to descend a collapsing mountain because a data scientist they'd never met said the stress patterns suggested more danger was coming. And then, nothing. The radio went silent. The GPS coordinates stopped updating. I was staring at my screen, at a frozen location on the northeast ridge at 11,050 feet, with no new data, no voice, no indication that Koda and the 8 hikers were still moving toward safety. Koda, respond, I said into the radio. Koda, confirm status. Static. Koda, we're losing your signal. Confirm receipt. More static. For what felt like an eternity but was probably only 30 seconds, there was nothing. Just the terrible silence of lost communication, and my seismic data still showing stress redistribution, still suggesting danger, still screaming at me that something terrible was happening on that mountain. Then Koda's voice came back. It was quieter, strained, but there. We're okay. GPS unit got knocked offline by avalanche dust. We're still moving down, still on the ridge. We're okay. I felt something release in my chest. He was alive. They were all alive. And he trusted me enough to push through the worst conditions I could imagine, because I'd told him the data was clear. 23 minutes later, Koda reached the base camp with all 8 hikers. They were exhausted, hypothermic, and 2 of them had minor injuries from being struck by airborne ice during the avalanche activity. But they were alive. The Rescue Coordination Center lost it. There were cheers and congratulations, and the kind of relief that only comes when a rescue operation succeeds against terrible odds. But I was watching the GPS coordinates showing Koda at the base camp, and I was thinking about what had just happened. I'd been sitting at a desk, reading seismic data, making predictions. Koda had been running up a mountain, gathering terrified hikers, racing against avalanches in time and the literal collapse of the landscape beneath his feet. And somehow he'd done it exactly the way I'd calculated. He'd trusted my data completely, even when it suggested he should run directly toward danger. That wasn't a professional relationship. That was something else. 20 minutes later, Koda appeared at my office at the USGS monitoring station. He was still in his mountain rescue gear, still covered in avalanche dust, his hair plastered to his forehead with sweat, and he was the most impressive person I'd ever seen.
He was Native American, Ute I'd learn later, tall, probably 6'2", with sharp features and intelligent dark eyes that held the specific light of someone who just stared death in the face and decided to fight anyway. He moved with the kind of confident precision that comes from years of operating in dangerous environments. That was incredible, he said, not bothering with introduction. You predicted the secondary earthquake timing. You predicted the avalanche danger. You understood the terrain well enough to direct me to the optimal extraction route, and you did all of it from a desk, reading numbers. That's my job, I said, but my voice sounded strange, uncertain. No, Koda said. Your job is to provide seismic data. What you did was more than that. You coordinated a rescue in real time. You adapted your predictions when conditions changed. You understood that the data needed to serve human survival, not just satisfy scientific accuracy. He sat down in the chair across from my desk, and I suddenly realized how exhausted he was, how much physical toll the last hour had taken on him, how he was still thinking about the rescue operation, still processing what had happened. I couldn't have done that without you, Koda said. I moved up that mountain because your calculations told me I had a window. I kept moving when I couldn't see anything because your data suggested the northeast ridge was safe. I trusted you completely, and you didn't let me down. Are you seeing anyone? I asked. Koda looked at me directly, and I saw the understanding cross his face. The recognition that what had happened between us during those 30 minutes, the coordination, the trust, the way we'd worked together to save 8 lives, was more than professional collaboration. No, he said. I'm not. Good, I said. Because what happened today, the way you trusted my data predictions, the way I trusted your terrain knowledge, the way we saved those hikers together, that's not something that happens between professionals. That's something that happens between people who understand each other completely. Koda reached over and took my hand. Just took it. Simple. Direct. Impossible to misinterpret. Kiss me, he said. Before the debriefing starts and we have to explain how we coordinated that rescue without killing everyone in the process. So I did. It was intense and urgent and tasted like mountain air and adrenaline, and the specific electricity of 2 people who just saved 8 lives together, and realized in the process that they'd also saved each other. Koda's hand came up to my face, the one that wasn't holding my hand, and his touch was gentle despite the intensity, and I felt something fundamental shift in how I understood the world. Not everything could be predicted by data. Some things, like love, like connection, like the instant recognition of someone who understood you, operated on their own physics.
3 months later, the initial earthquake was still being studied by seismic researchers across the country. My predictions about the secondary earthquake timing had been remarkably accurate, off by only 53 seconds, which had sparked conversations in the scientific community about real-time seismic forecasting and immediate hazard assessment. But more importantly, Koda and I had become inseparable. He'd transferred to a position with the Rocky Mountain Rescue Operations Center based in Denver, which meant we could live in the same city, work in complementary fields, and continue to build on what we'd started during that mountain rescue. We began collaborating on research, combining seismic data analysis with terrain risk assessment, creating new frameworks for understanding how earthquake activity affected mountain stability. Koda would bring field expertise and intuitive understanding of high-altitude dynamics. I would bring mathematical modeling and data prediction. Together, we were creating something that neither of us could have created alone. We also started taking weekend hikes together, always on stable terrain, always with multiple safety protocols, always with Koda checking the seismic monitoring network before we went anywhere. He joked that I was the first person he'd dated who checked earthquake probability before planning date activities. It's not romantic, he said to me once as we were standing on a ridge overlooking the Indian peaks, looking out over the mountains that had brought us together. It's romantic, I replied, because you understand that I care about your safety more than I care about being spontaneous, and I understand that you care about protecting people more than you care about being comfortable. That's the most romantic thing I've ever encountered. Koda smiled. You're weird, he said, but you're my weird. 4 months after the rescue, on a clear September day, Koda took me back to the basin where he'd extracted the stranded hikers. The slopes had recovered from the avalanche activity. Snow was beginning to accumulate in the high country again. The mountains looked peaceful, stable, benign, no indication that they'd nearly killed 9 people just 4 months earlier. I have something to ask you, Koda said as we stood in the basin, looking up at the slopes that had avalanched, looking out at the ridge we'd escaped down. Are you seeing anyone? I asked before he could finish. Koda laughed. That specific laugh that still made my heart tighten with recognition. That's not the question, but I'll answer it. I'm only seeing you, only thinking about you, only want to build my future with you. He produced a ring, made from stone salvaged from the mountain where we'd met, inlaid with meteorite material that had fallen from the sky. It was Earth and cosmos. It was perfect. Will you marry me? Koda asked. Will you spend your life with someone who understands that love isn't about perfect prediction, it's about trusting each other completely, even when the ground beneath your feet might stop being solid? It's about knowing that some connections transcend data and analysis, and that they're the most important predictions you'll ever make. Yes, I said, because I already knew the answer. I'd known it from the moment Koda trusted my seismic predictions enough to race up a mountain during an earthquake.
I'd known it when I trusted his terrain knowledge even though I couldn't verify it with data. I'd known it every moment since. Epilogue. The security camera footage from the USGS Denver station shows two people standing in the lobby, kissing at sunset. The timestamp reads 6:17 p.m. on September 14th. Behind them the wall displays seismic monitoring data, graphs and charts showing earthquake activity and stress distribution, but we're not looking at any of that. We're looking at each other. Two people who met during an earthquake and a mountain rescue and discovered that the most powerful force wasn't seismic energy or gravitational pull or any of the physics that I'd spent my life studying. It was the specific gravity of two people who'd learned that they could trust each other completely, that they could coordinate survival under impossible conditions, that they could save each other. The Rocky Mountains will continue to shift and settle, earthquakes will continue to occur, avalanches will continue to cascade down slopes, systems will require constant monitoring and understanding, but we'll be there together, one person reading the Earth's signals and predicting what's coming, the other person understanding the mountains and terrain with intuitive precision. That's the real convergence. That's the real alignment of forces. That's Oren and Koda,